All right, ready to dive into some serious strategy. You've sent us this incredible collection of excerpts from Sun Tzu's The Art of War and some historical commentaries, too. Seems like you're looking to become a master strategist.
Well, it's fascinating because we're about to unpack a work that's been studied for centuries. And not just by military leaders, but by all sorts of people, business executives, politicians, you name it.
So let's start with Sun Tzu himself.
Yeah.
Was he a real historical figure or more like a legend?
It's a great question. Sun Tzu is actually shrouded in a bit of mystery. We're not even entirely sure if he was one person or maybe a group of strategists who combined their knowledge.
A historical puzzle. So scholars are still trying to piece together the origins of the art of war. But no matter who wrote it, it's had a huge impact on military thinking for centuries.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that makes it so interesting is that it's not just about battlefield tactics. It's about human psychology, tower dynamics, deception, all sorts of things.
Speaking of deception, there's that story about Sun Tzu training the king of Wu's concubines. Sounds a little unusual, to say the least.
It really does. It's a story that shows Sun Tzu's dedication to discipline and his out-of-the-box thinking. So the king was really impressed by Sun Tzu's reputation and wanted to see his skills in action. But instead of a military demonstration, he asked Sun Tzu to train his concubines. You know, the women who were more used to luxury than military drills.
I can imagine. A group of concubines trying to follow military commands. It must have been chaotic. So, what happened?
Well, Sun Tzu, he took the challenge seriously, divided the women into companies, tried to drill them, but as you might expect, they found the whole thing pretty amusing. Giggling, disobeying orders, the whole bit.
So, how did Sun Tzu, known for his strictness, handle this situation?
He warned them, told them disobedience would be punished, but the laughter continued. So, to really emphasize how serious he was, he ordered the execution of two of the leading concubines.
Wow, that's a drastic way to make a point. What was the king's reaction?
The king was horrified, of course. He begged Sun Tzu to spare their lives, even said his meals would be tasteless without them.
So, did Sun Tzu give in?
Not at all. He stood his ground, said that as the appointed general, his authority couldn't be undermined.
Wow, he actually went through with it.
He did, and it worked. The remaining concubines instantly understood the gravity of the situation and obeyed his every command. Perfect precision in their drills from that moment on.
It's a pretty powerful, if dramatic, illustration of discipline and clear communication, a
Yeah.
story that's resonated with leaders for centuries. It shows you need clear boundaries and consequences, even in unexpected situations.
It does. It also underscores that leadership isn't about being liked, but about being respected and making sure your commands are followed, even if that means making tough choices.
So the art of war is more than just winning battles. It's about that human element of conflict, psychology of power, leadership dynamics, all of that.
Exactly. And those are the insights that have made Sun Tzu's work so enduring and relevant.
Now, let's dig into some core principles from the art of war. One of the most famous is, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's the foundation of Sun Tzu's strategy, really emphasizes the importance of self-awareness and intelligence gathering, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, as well as your opponent's.
So it's not just brute force, it's about using knowledge as a weapon. Any historical examples that really highlight this?
Oh, absolutely. There's a story of Sun Pin, a descendant of Sun Tzu. He was advising the Qi general during a war with the Wei state. The Wei army, led by General Pang Xuan, had a major advantage in numbers.
Classic underdog situation. So how does Sun Pin use his knowledge to even the odds?
He knew Pang Xuan was arrogant, prone to underestimating his enemies, and he used that to his advantage. As the Qi army retreated, Sun Pin had them reduce the number of campfires they lit each night.
I'm intrigued. What was the point of that?
Pang Xuan, seeing fewer and fewer fires, assumed the Qi army was deserting, got overconfident, led his troops in hot pursuit, thinking it would be an easy victory.
Right into Sun Pin's trap.
Exactly. Sun Pin had anticipated this and had an ambush set up in a valley. As the Wei army marched in, Sun Pin's archers let loose a volley of arrows, routed the overconfident enemy.
It's like a perfect illustration of using psychology and strategy to win, even when you're outnumbered.
Exactly. It shows how information, not just force, can shape the battlefield.
This idea of outsmarting your opponent rather than just overwhelming them seems to come up a lot in Sun Tzu's work.
Oh, for sure. Sun Tzu believed the ultimate goal of war was peace, and the best way to achieve that was to win quickly and decisively. Minimize casualties, minimize destruction.
Powerful concept. So the art of war is not glorifying violence, it's a guide to a more stable world.
Exactly. And that philosophy is reflected in his emphasis on avoiding long conflicts and finding ways to break the enemy's resistance without huge battles.
Being strategic, not just aggressive. Any historical examples of this in action?
Many. One involves Cao Cao. You know that brilliant general and strategist we mentioned earlier? He found himself in a tight spot during one campaign, outnumbered and completely surrounded.
That sounds desperate.
He's surrounded.
Not Cao Cao. He was known for his bold tactics. Waited until nightfall, then launched a surprise attack on the enemy camp. Caught them completely off guard.
I bet they weren't expecting that. What happened?
The attack was so swift, so unexpected, that the enemy, even though they had more soldiers, was routed. Cao Cao turned what seemed like a hopeless situation into a stunning victory, just through timing and action.
It's not about avoiding conflict altogether. It's about picking your moment. And it sounds like discipline plays a big part in Sun Tzu's philosophy, too.
Oh, absolutely. One of his famous lines is, "Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look on them as your own beloved sons, and they will stand by you, even unto death."
That's a powerful image. It's about the bond between leaders and followers, right? Sounds like he's saying discipline comes from respect and trust, not just fear. Exactly. A well-disciplined army, according to Sun Tzu, is one motivated by loyalty, a sense of purpose, a belief in their leader, not just fear.
And isn't there a story about General Lu Meng that demonstrates this?
Yes, Lu Meng was strict, that's for sure, but he also knew how to earn respect. During one campaign, he strictly forbade looting, harassing civilians, wanted to maintain order, good relations with the locals.
Smart strategy. But I bet it wasn't easy to enforce.
You're right. One of his own officers, someone from his hometown, was caught stealing from a civilian. But despite the personal connection, Lu Meng had the officer executed, upheld his orders.
It must have been a tough call.
It was, but it sent a message, reinforced his authority. The troops knew no one was above the law.
True leadership, then, is about setting clear expectations and sticking to them, no matter what.
Exactly. Creating a culture of accountability and respect, where everyone understands the rules and the consequences for breaking them.
And this discipline, it's not just a military thing. It's about building strong teams in any setting.
Right. Whether it's on a battlefield, in a company, or even in your personal life, self-control, focus, working towards a shared goal, those are valuable.
Sun Tzu also had a lot to say about using the environment to your advantage, especially the terrain.
He did. He actually categorized terrain into 6 types: accessible ground, entangling ground, temporizing ground, narrow passes, precipitous heights, and positions at a great distance. Each one presented unique challenges and opportunities.
So it's like he's saying the battlefield itself can be a weapon.
Exactly. You can use it to your advantage if you know how. There's a great story about General P.A. Xingqian from the Tang Dynasty, known for his tactical brilliance. During one campaign, he suddenly ordered his troops to move camp to a hilltop.
Out of the blue, why?
His officers were confused, complained about the extra work, but that night, a huge storm hit, flooded their original campsite.
Wait, he predicted a natural disaster.
Seems like it. His officers were amazed by his foresight. But P.A. Xingqian, he never explained his decision, just emphasized the importance of following orders.
Talk about a lesson in trust and obedience. And it really shows how understanding the environment and making decisive choices can turn potential disaster into advantage.
It is. It's a good reminder that sometimes the best strategies are the ones that seem counterintuitive at first.
So Sun Tzu wasn't just a brilliant strategist, he was a keen observer of nature, using the elements to his advantage.
Absolutely. He understood that war, just like life, is unpredictable, and being able to adapt is essential for success.
And there's one more aspect of Sun Tzu's strategy that we haven't touched on: espionage.
Ah, the world of spies. Sun Tzu thought they were essential, said spies are a most important element in war because on them depends an army's ability to move.
So he wasn't just talking about sneaky missions. This was about sophisticated intelligence gathering, deception, psychological warfare.
Exactly. Sun Tzu even categorized spies into 5 types: local spies, inward spies, converted spies, doomed spies, and surviving spies, each with their own role in his strategy.
5 types. That's quite a network. Can you break down the differences?
Sure, so let's start with local spies. They were recruited from, the people living in the area where the conflict was happening. They'd provide insights into the terrain, local customs, how the enemy was moving around.
So like having eyes and ears on the ground.
Yeah.
A real grassroots perspective. What about inward spies?
Inward spies were individuals already within the enemy ranks, officials, people in positions of power who had been persuaded, maybe bribed, to switch sides. They can provide really sensitive information, the enemy's plans, their inner workings, that sort of thing.
Sounds incredibly valuable,
Yeah.
but also incredibly risky, living that double life.
Oh, absolutely. Not a job for the faint of heart. But the intelligence they could provide, it could change the game. Then there's converted spies. This is interesting. These were enemy spies who'd been captured, but then, get this, convinced to work for our side.
Turning your opponent's weapon against them. That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
How did Sun Tzu suggest handling those converted spies?
He emphasized treating them well. Generous rewards, safety guaranteed. He knew they were taking a huge risk by switching sides. Building trust was key.
Makes sense. You wouldn't want them to feel like they were just being used.
Exactly. You want them to feel valued because their knowledge could be incredibly valuable. They could point out weaknesses, identify key targets, even help sow discord within the enemy ranks.
Now, doomed spies? That's a tough one to grasp. Sending someone into a situation knowing they'll be captured seems pretty ruthless.
This was a last resort tactic, a really high-stakes gamble. The doomed spy would be given false information, knowing full well they'd likely be caught and interrogated.
So the enemy thinks they've uncovered something important, acts on that bad information, and walks right into a trap.
Precisely.
That's risky, not just for the spy, but for the general making that call. It raises some ethical questions about how far you're willing to go with deception.
It does. It shows the moral complexities of war and the tough decisions leaders sometimes have to make. Sun Tzu knew war was brutal, and sometimes sacrifices had to be made for what's seen as the greater good.
And lastly, the surviving spies, the ones who make it back with valuable intel. What made them so successful, according to Sun Tzu?
Intelligence, cunning, physical strength, ability to blend in, all crucial. They also had to withstand interrogation if captured, resist bribes, resist threats, stay completely loyal to the mission.
Ancient espionage sounds intense. A high-stakes game requiring a unique set of skills and total dedication.
Absolutely. They were often the unsung heroes, their actions shaping history, even if their stories remained hidden.
Okay, so we've got the types of spies, their roles, but what about their methods? How did they actually operate in the field?
Well, it really depended on the situation and the kind of information they needed. Some spies used disguise. They'd blend in with the locals, listen in on conversations, pick up rumors, and gossip.
Like undercover agents, essentially.
Exactly. Others might sneak into enemy camps, maybe pretending to be deserters or merchants, to observe troop movements, defenses, get a sense of morale.
That sounds incredibly dangerous. How do they avoid being caught?
It was a constant game of cat and mouse, requiring sharp observation skills, quick thinking, resourcefulness. They might use secret signals, coded messages, secret meeting spots to talk to their handlers.
It's like something out of a spy novel.
It was. And remember, this was centuries before modern tech. No fancy gadgets. They relied on their wits, their instincts, and their ability to blend in.
What about the information they gathered? How did they get that back to their commanders?
They had to be creative. Sometimes they used hidden messages, coded signals, even carrier pigeons. And sometimes they'd just memorize details and recite them when they got back.
That's some serious memory skill.
Oh, yeah. These spies were highly skilled. Observation, memorization, deception. They had to be good at it all.
And the risks. What happened if they were caught?
The stakes were incredibly high. Capture usually meant torture or death. Spying was dangerous, and they knew it. Operating behind enemy lines, no backup, no guarantees.
It's amazing to think about the courage it took to be a spy back then. Real unsung heroes.
Absolutely. Their actions could shape the course of history, even if their stories remain hidden.
So it wasn't just about armies clashing on a battlefield. These spies, they were often the key to victory.
They were. They provided vital information, allowed generals to make smart decisions, outmaneuver their opponents, choose the right moment to strike. They were the foundation of Sun Tzu's strategy.
It's incredible how much impact these individuals had.
It is. Their dedication, their willingness to risk everything, it's remarkable. And even though their stories might be secret, their actions were often decisive.
Okay, so now we have a better picture of these spies, their types, their methods, the incredible risks they took. A fascinating glimpse into a part of warfare we don't often think about.
Exactly. But as we continue to explore the art of war, let's remember Sun Tzu's ultimate goal: peace. How do his ideas translate to today's world? A world still full of conflict and competition.
That's a big question. Sun Tzu was writing about war in ancient China. But his insights into human nature, strategy, conflict, they seem timeless.
They do. Even though he was writing about war, his goal was to prevent it. He believed that through understanding the principles of war, preparing thoroughly, knowing yourself and your enemy, acting decisively, you could actually deter conflict and achieve lasting peace.
So it's like he's saying strength and preparedness can actually prevent war.
Exactly. He believed that weakness invites aggression, while strength and resolve can deter it. He also emphasized diplomacy, negotiation, finding ways to resolve conflicts peacefully.
So it's a more holistic view of peace, one that involves diplomacy, strategic thinking, understanding people.
Precisely. And that message feels very relevant today in a world with so many complex challenges: global pandemics, climate change, political instability.
So how do we apply Sun Tzu's ideas to these modern challenges? These aren't traditional wars with armies and battlefields.
True. But the basic principles of strategy, negotiation, understanding human behavior, they still apply. For example, Sun Tzu's emphasis on knowing yourself. That's crucial in any complex situation.
You have to understand your own values, goals, and limitations before you can effectively engage with others.
Right. And knowing your enemy in this context might mean understanding what's driving these challenges, whether it's a virus, climate change, or political ideologies.
We need to grasp the science, economics, politics, and psychology behind these challenges to find solutions.
Absolutely. And Sun Tzu's focus on planning and adaptability, those seem especially relevant in a world that's constantly changing, full of surprises.
We need to be able to anticipate challenges, develop flexible plans, and adapt as new information comes in.
Exactly. And maybe we don't need spies in the traditional sense anymore, but the idea of gathering intelligence, that's still vital.
Whether it's a pandemic or a tough business negotiation, having accurate, timely information is essential for good decision-making.
Couldn't agree more. We need to constantly be learning, listening, gathering information from all kinds of sources to make good decisions.
So the art of war, even though it's ancient, it's full of wisdom that applies to our lives today.
It is. And by studying it, understanding strategy, negotiation, human behavior, we can all become better leaders, more informed citizens, better at navigating this complex world.
That's a great takeaway. Well, we've reached the end of our deep dives. It's been an amazing journey exploring Sun Tzu's life and legacy, the intricacies of the art of war, and how his ideas apply to challenges both old and new.
It's been a pleasure discussing this with you, and I hope our listeners have a new appreciation for Sun Tzu's wisdom and how relevant it still is. The art of war, it's not just about winning battles. It's about understanding people, mastering strategy, and ultimately trying to create a more peaceful world.
Beautifully put. And on that note, we'll leave our listeners with a final thought from Sun Tzu. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Welcome back. As we wrap up our deep dive into the art of war, let's circle back to a topic that's both fascinating and crucial to Sun Tzu's strategy: the world of spies.
Right. We've talked about the different kinds of spies, but I'm still curious about how they actually worked and why they were so important to Sun Tzu.
Well, for Sun Tzu, knowledge was everything. He believed that to truly defeat an enemy, you had to know them inside and out: their strengths, weaknesses, plans, even their fears. And spies, they were his way of getting that knowledge. They operated in secret, gathering the information that could change the course of a war.
So they weren't just background players. They were actively shaping events with the intelligence they brought back.
Absolutely. Think of them as the hidden force multipliers. Their actions often went unnoticed by history, but they could make all the difference. They could even determine whether nations lived or died.
It's incredible to think about the risks they took, working behind enemy lines like that. What kind of dangers were they facing?
Oh, the stakes were incredibly high. Being a spy back then was dangerous. They knew if they were caught, torture and death were almost certain. No backup, no support system, just their wits and their loyalty to the mission.
It must have taken so much courage to operate under those conditions. What did Sun Tzu think made a good spy?
Intelligence, cunning, physical strength, all essential. They had to blend in, observe everything, and avoid capture at all costs. And if they were caught, they had to withstand interrogation, resist bribes and threats, and stay completely loyal no matter what.
Sounds like ancient espionage was a pretty intense game, requiring a very specific set of skills and incredible mental toughness.
It was. And we have to remember, this was centuries before modern technology. No gadgets or fancy equipment. They had to rely on their own abilities to observe, to think quickly, to blend in, to survive.
So how did they actually go about gathering information? What were their methods?
Well, it really depended on the situation and what they were trying to find out. Sometimes they used disguise. They would pose as merchants or travelers, even beggars, to move around unnoticed and gather information.
So they were masters of disguise, changing their identities to get what they needed.
Exactly. Others might try to sneak into enemy camps, maybe pretending to be deserters, to learn about troop movements, defenses, morale, things like that.
That sounds incredibly risky. How did they manage to avoid getting caught?
It was a constant game of cat and mouse. They had to be incredibly observant, able to think on their feet, and resourceful. They used secret signals, coded messages, hidden meeting spots to communicate with their handlers. Every step they took was dangerous.
And once they had the information, how did they get it back to their commanders?
Well, they had to be creative. Sometimes they used hidden messages, maybe disguised as something ordinary, or they used coded signals, subtle gestures, things like that. And in some cases, they even used carrier pigeons to send messages.
It sounds like ancient espionage required more than just bravery and cunning. It took a bit of artistry, too.
You could say that. It was a world of secrets, of whispers in the dark. Every little piece of information could change the course of history. And these spies, they were the ones risking their lives to get it.
It's amazing how much influence those individuals had, working behind the scenes to shape events.
It really is. And their stories, even though we don't often hear them, they show us the power of human ingenuity, the importance of information in any kind of conflict.
Well, we've certainly explored a lot in this deep dive. From Sun Tzu's grand strategies to this fascinating world of spies, we've seen how his ideas apply not just to war, but to challenges we face in all parts of life.
It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it? Exploring how relevant Sun Tzu still is today. And I hope our listeners have gained a new understanding of the power of strategy, the importance of being prepared, and the value of truly understanding human nature.
Absolutely. Thanks for guiding us through this. It's been really eye-opening.
My pleasure. Remember what Sun Tzu said, every battle is won before it is fought. So let's all use his wisdom to achieve our own victories in whatever battles we face.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Sun Tzu's Art of War. Until next time, keep those strategies sharp.